Avengers Endgame is without a doubt one of the most epic movies ever made. It has everything. Awesome characters, both heroic and villainous, a great plot, amazing action, humor,
get it together,
tragedy, powerful MacGuffins, time travel, and much, much more.
Okay.
But such a complex movie will always inevitably come with errors and oversights.
Delete that footage.
And in this video, we'll be taking you through some of those that made it into the movie. Here are 25 mistakes fans missed in Avengers Endgame. At the very beginning of Avengers Endgame, when Jeremy Renner's Clint Barton was teaching his daughter Lila to shoot a bow and arrow on his family's farm, she hit the bullseye on the target she was aiming at. Immediately after, while she'd gone to collect the arrow from said target, Clint's entire family disappeared thanks to Thanos snapping his fingers during the events of last year's Avengers Infinity War. While Clint looked around trying to find them, the camera went back to the target and the arrow had disappeared, but in the very next shot, it had reappeared in its original position. A continuity error that early in the movie really didn't set the best precedent, and things only got worse from that point onward. In the scene immediately following the opening title of Avengers Endgame, Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark was recording a message to Pepper Potts using his Iron Man helmet on board the Benatar in deep space.
Hey, Miss Potts.
The helmet was damaged, having been worn in the fight with Thanos on Titan in Avengers Infinity War, but there was a mistake. When Tony was recording his message, the damage to the helmet was on the right side of it, but in Avengers Infinity War, the damage it took was actually on the left side, courtesy of several punches from Thanos' right hand. In fact, the helmet was actually punched clean off of Tony's head just before he was stabbed, which would suggest it was actually damaged way more than the scene in Endgame suggests.
All that for a drop of blood.
When Paul Rudd's Scott Lang emerged from the quantum realm in 2023, he quickly found out about the decimation. He immediately made his way to a San Francisco memorial site for those who disappeared and searched frantically for his daughter's name, Cassie Lang, amongst the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of names on the site's stone monuments. However, the names listed on the stones were certainly not in alphabetical order. Granted, all the people with surnames beginning with L followed by A were clustered together, but other than that particular method of grouping, the names absolutely did not appear to follow any order whatsoever.
I screw it up just about every time.
You could say that this mistake happened in 2018's Ant-Man and the Wasp, but given that that movie came out before Avengers Endgame, it was the latter, ignoring it, that technically made it become a mistake. When Scott Lang entered the quantum realm under the observation of Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, and Hope Van Dyne in the Ant-Man and the Wasp mid-credits scene, he had a communicator on him. Using this device enabled Scott to talk to the trio in real time.
Scott, we read you.
But Endgame ignored that. The fourth Avengers movie revealed that time passes more slowly in the quantum realm, so real-time communication between characters inside and outside of it should not have been able to happen in the Ant-Man sequel.
Hello?
When Natasha Romanoff headed to Japan to recruit Clint Barton for the Avengers time travel mission, she found him in his Ronin guise, mercilessly killing members of the Yakuza. Barton could be seen wiping his sword clean using his sleeve, but what exactly was he wiping the blade clean of? There was no blood on it, and none of the corpses he'd left behind had any blood on them, so that was weird. When we were first introduced to the all-new Professor Hulk in Avengers Endgame, he was sitting, eating lunch in a diner, talking time travel with Steve Rogers, Natasha Romanoff, and Scott Lang. He had a plate full of crepes, enough to fill even the big guy's green ample belly. And the crepe on top of his large pile was cut into 2 pieces. There were several shots of the crepe in question, but in one of them, it was miraculously back in 1 piece, before reverting to being in 2 pieces again in the next shot. Unless you're in the business of taking crepes particularly seriously, it's not a big deal, but it's a definite continuity error nonetheless. More food problems now. You know that funny scene in the movie where Scott Lang was eating his lunch outside the Avengers headquarters, but it turned out he was sitting in the landing zone and his food got blown out of his hands when War Machine landed next to him? Well, at that point, the Hulk walked up to Scott and offered him 2 tacos. There was a clear shot in which you could see 2 of the delicious snacks in Banner's hand. However, in the very next shot, the big green guy is handing only 1 taco over to Scott. Unless either of these 2 characters ate one of them at crazy levels of super speed, it was a definite continuity error, albeit a very minor one. To recruit Thor and involve him in the plan to retrieve the Infinity Stones from throughout history, Bruce Banner and Rocket traveled to the Asgardians' new home on Earth.
Asgard is not a place. Never was. This could be Asgard.
New Asgard, as it was called, is actually located in Tonsberg, in Norway, but the scene was filmed in Scotland. The Scottish influence was clearly there. However, as the truck the Green Goliath and the Raccoon used to get there had a UK license plate, SW615PN, whereas Norwegian plates used 2 letters followed by 4 or 5 numbers. Moreover, the pizza boxes in Thor's house had a phone number in the UK format, 01632960776, rather than Norwegian. In fact, the 01632 area code was specifically designated for fictional use in the UK, and Norwegian telephone numbers use fewer digits. Prior to the titular team's time travel exploits in Avengers Endgame, the heroes had a discussion about exactly how time travel works in comparison to depictions of the concept in fiction. Don Cheadle's James Rhodes listed several time travel themed movies in which someone changed the past and in turn altered the future. Time Cop and Time After Time, for example. However, he also mentioned 2 movies, The Terminator and Somewhere in Time, that actually had time travel working in a completely different way. That being the theory of the feedback loop or predestination paradox, in which anything done by a time traveler actually causes the past to unfold the way it always had done. So yeah, he got that wrong.
Time travel!
Oh my god.
What?
The most important port of call in the Avengers' plan to take the Infinity Stones from the past was New York in 2012, because there were 3 of the stones there at the time. That, of course, resulted in some of the team getting very close to past versions of themselves. Following the battle in the first Avengers movie, Captain America had lost his helmet, was dirty, and had a damaged suit and a battered face. And yet, when the scene in which Loki was being arrested was revisited in Avengers Endgame, Cap had his helmet on and his suit and face were both intact and clean, which was further confirmed when 2012 Cap and 2023 Cap fought against each other. Another mistake that occurred in Avengers Endgame during the scene in 2012 New York happened when Captain America entered an elevator to retrieve Loki's scepter from the Hydra agents. In said scene, Maximiliano Hernandez's Jasper Sitwell could be seen using a Samsung S6 cell phone. The only problem is that that particular model of cell phone wasn't released until 2015, 3 years after that scene took place. Now, granted, the MCU takes place in a world in which there is technology far more advanced than in the real world, but there's nothing suggesting the tech produced by real-world companies is any more advanced than it is in reality, so this is definitely an oversight on the part of Marvel Studios. As part of the plan to retrieve the Infinity Stones from different points in history in Avengers Endgame, the unlikely pairing of Nebula and James Rhodes headed to Morag in 2014, where the Power Stone was located. It was there that we were introduced to Chris Pratt's Star-Lord in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, as he danced and sang along to Come and Get Your Love. Not long after the singing and dancing, Jaimin Hansu's Korath interrupted with his henchmen.
Star-Lord. Who?
And demanded that he hand the stone over to him. And yet, when Nebula and Rhodey knocked Quill out and took the stone for themselves, Korath was a no-show, when he should really have found himself confronting the pair in the same way he did Quill.
Hey.
When the 2023 version of Nebula went back in time to take the Power Stone from Morag with Rhodey, she formed a mental connection with her past self, thanks to the fact that both versions of the character were, in part, made from computerized components that interfaced with each other.
Every time my sister prevailed, my father would replace a piece of me with machinery.
By using 2014 Nebula's access to 2023's Nebula's memories, the past version of Thanos was able to discover the Avengers' intentions and make a move to counteract them. That's a pretty crazy premise to begin with, but it was also remarkably convenient. Why would past Nebula be the only one who could access the mind of her alternate timeline counterpart? Why didn't it work both ways? Why didn't the 2023 notice the 2014 Nebula was gaining new memories and experiences based on her arrival? Seems like another oversight on the part of the writers. When the Avengers messed up in their attempts to take the Space Stone from 2012 New York, they were forced to change their plan to retrieve it. As a result, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers headed to a SHIELD base in 1970 to take it from there, along with some Pym particles. While they were there, Rogers saw Peggy Carter through her office window, but she looked no older than she did in the 1940s. Peggy should be around 50 years old in 1970 because she was born around 1920. For comparison, Howard Stark was played by a completely different actor in 1970, John Slattery, rather than Dominic Cooper in the 1940s. Simply put, how did Peggy not age? And now we come to the second error based on Captain America's clothing in this video. This one occurred in that aforementioned scene in 1970. The army uniform that Cap was wearing while he and Tony Stark were on that shield base had his rank of captain correctly indicated on his cap, as well as his right collar point. But his left collar point had his service branch indicator, which unfortunately actually had a resemblance to the lieutenant colonel rank. So basically, that was all a bit of a military mess. Military mess, huh? Get it?
I understood that reference.
And now we come to another mistake from that scene at the shield base in 1970. Geez, in hindsight, that scene did not go well, did it? This one happened as Steve Rogers was signaling to Tony Stark that he'd accomplished his goal of retrieving a batch of Pym particles and was ready to leave. We could see that Stark was speaking to his father Howard about things like fatherhood, and as they were speaking, in the background, there were two privates in dark uniforms speaking to an officer who was wearing a beige uniform. As the camera switched between the two generations of the Stark family, the privates were still there, but the officer appeared and disappeared alternatively. Not long after 2014 Thanos arrived in 2023, he ended up in a fight against the MCU's holy trinity of Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. The Mad Titan rather quickly gained the upper hand and, after getting the better of Thor, attempted to push Stormbreaker into the God of Thunder's chest. But then Captain America started wielding Mjolnir and attacked the villain again. And immediately after getting hit by Mjolnir, Stormbreaker in Thanos' hand changed into his double-edged sword, which had been thrown far away just a few moments earlier. Thanos absolutely could not summon his weapon back the same way Thor could summon Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, so how the heck did that happen? Because it was yet another oversight, that's how. We know Scott Lang has some amazing abilities in the MCU. He can shrink to the size of an insect, he can grow to the size of a giant, and he can travel into the subatomic quantum realm. But we didn't realize he could clone himself in order to be in two places at once. That's what happened in the final battle in Avengers Endgame though. When Lang and Hope Van Dyne were in Scott's van on the battlefield, both at their normal human size, Lang's giant form could still be seen stomping around in the middle of the big fight. Hey, there was a lot going on in that scene. We think we can forgive the special effects guys for this one. After 11 years of MCU movies, we know that pretty much anything is possible when it comes to Tony Stark's Iron Man armor designs, especially since he's been using nanotechnology to create them. He can generally summon it or control it with the touch of a button or a voice command. Think of the time he deployed the Mark 7 in 2012's Avengers movie, for example. So why didn't he just do that with the Stark Tech Gauntlet when Thanos was trying to grab it in the final battle of Avengers Endgame? It wouldn't be the first time we'd seen Tony move pieces of his armor in such a manner, but Endgame seemed to suggest that he had no control whatsoever over the gauntlet, which has to be considered a mistake. When Thanos did get his hands on Tony Stark's gauntlet in the final battle of Avengers Endgame, which of course had all 6 Infinity Stones in it at the time, the usual surge of power engulfed his body. At that point, Stark attacked him, taking the stones from the glove without the prune-chin villain realizing. But then, as the Mad Titan was adjusting the glove, he looked directly at the back of it, just before attempting another snap. So how on earth didn't he realize there were no stones in it? He also must have felt the power of the stones leaving his body. Avengers Endgame revealed that time passes more slowly in the quantum realm. What felt like 5 hours to Scott Lang was actually 5 years in the real world, and if that's the case, Michelle Pfeiffer's Janet Van Dyne should look a lot younger than she does. Hank Pym's wife was trapped in the quantum realm for 3 decades in real time, which according to Endgame's math, should only have been around 30 hours in the quantum realm. Her appearance in Endgame at Tony Stark's funeral continued that mistake. At the end of Avengers Endgame, when Thor was speaking with Valkyrie about her becoming the new Queen of Asgard, we could see that his beard had been trimmed and was much shorter than it had previously been in the movie. However, in the very next scene, when Thor was on board the Benatar with the Guardians, his beard was back to how long it was earlier in the film. For all the victims of Thanos' snap, No time passed at all over the course of 5 years. They simply dusted, then re-emerged half a decade later, no older than they were before, but for everyone else, 5 years passed before the Avengers brought everyone else back. 5 stressful years in which they probably aged considerably more than they usually would. That means that everyone who survived the decimation aged. So why are all of Peter Parker's classmates still the same age at the end of Avengers Endgame? Surely half of them would have been decimated? Ridiculous. To keep every timeline the Infinity Stones came from safe, Captain America returned them, but this created a number of problems. How, for example, did Cap return the Soul Stone? When Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton arrived on Vormir, it was inaccessible, in a different plane of existence, until Romanoff sacrificed herself. You just can't put it back. What about the Reality Stone? That was inside Jane Foster. Did Cap just walk over to her and shove it back in? Unlikely. Then there's the Tesseract. When Cap took it from the S.H.I.E.L.D. base, it was in the form of a cube. When he took it back, it was just a stone. That would be kind of noticeable. At the very end of Avengers Endgame, when the elderly Steve Rogers returned to the present to give Sam Wilson his shield, he said something that didn't really make any sense. He told Wilson, "I thought I'd try some of that life Tony was telling me to get." But Tony Stark had said nothing of the sort. In reality, it was actually Natasha Romanoff who jokingly told him to get a life at the beginning of the movie, after he had told her to do the same. We could simply put this down to Steve's memory getting worse in his old age, but given that he still seemed to have all of his faculties, it has to be put down as a mistake. What did you think of this video? Did you notice any other mistakes in Avengers Endgame? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ScreenRant for more great videos like this one. See you next time, guys.